This is a complete Mists of Pandaria PvP tier list for all DPS classes and specs and how they perform on the latest patch 5.4.8 on which all World of Warcraft private servers run. It was made with the help of a seasoned PvP veteran from Panda WoW, Dowdy and Stormforge, 2.7k exp in 2v2 arena on Mists of Pandaria's Holy Paladin and Arms Warrior, Wickedfury aka Bukaku. Classes are ranked from F, unplayable, to S, the most overpowered. PvP in Mists of Pandaria is one of the best it's ever been. Overall, it is fairly balanced, and although heal plus DPS comps are a bit more powerful than on Cataclysm, it's still possible for many double DPS comps in 2v2 to beat pretty much anybody if played right. The one composition that would be considered the most overpowered on Mists of Pandaria, a comp that beats everything, would be Frost Mage with a Holy Priest or Resto Druid in 2v2. That is the most dominant 2v2 comp on Mists of Pandaria on any private server. It has endless crowd control, which is very hard to prevent. Even if you can counter one or two of their crowd controls, you will be hit by the third one anyway. Priests have been given a short invisibility spell in Mists of Pandaria, making it even harder to prevent fears from them. Combined with Mage's insane peeling capabilities, especially now in Mists of Pandaria, where you can no longer spam the spell since it's been given an 8-second cooldown across the board, you dispel one freeze and you get another one right after. Healers now have a lot more instant cast heals, making it even easier to counter classes that would otherwise interrupt their spell casts. You wouldn't see triple DPS comps in 3v3 anymore, as it used to be a popular choice on Cataclysm. It is overall slower paced gameplay in Mists of Pandaria compared to the previous expansions. You have more time to react, more defensive abilities, although you can still expect big hits from classes like Destruction Warlock Scales Bolt, Windwalker Monk's Fist of Fury, or Enhancement and Elemental Shamans during Ascendance. There is no longer need to use any PvE gear on Mists of Pandaria, not even trinkets. You want to have as much PvP power and resilience as possible, so you will want to go full PvP gear to have maximum advantage. You pretty much never see anyone playing a tank spec in Arena. The only useful classes that can tank in Battleground scenarios are Blood Death Knights and Guardian Druid, or Brewmaster Monk because of his mobility. Out of these three, Guardian Druid would be the best for flat carrying or defending bases. Tank's damage also still sucks, much like on Cataclysm. The first of the DPS specs is the Retribution Paladin. Ret shines in 3v3 arenas because of his many support abilities. He's one of the best in off healing, can use Hand of Sacrifice to remove crowd control, very good damage during burst windows, good in 2v2 with Marksmanship Hunter, but there aren't many other options for Retribution outside of that, which would be super competitive. It could be playable with Shadow Priest, Rogue or Mage, but they are nowhere near comparable to Marksmanship Hunter. Not good with healers since outside of his bursts, damage isn't good enough. Red is one of the better double DPS options for Arena. For 3v3, you'd want to play as Red, Marksmanship and Resto Shaman, or Holy Paladin ideally, maybe even Priest Healer. Shadow Priest or Windwalker Monk could also be an option. Enhancement Shaman works fine too, but most Enhancement Shamans will prefer to play with a Warrior in 3v3. Red plus Enhance can easily one-shot healers on Switch. Not much mobility outside of his Judgment buff, decent defensives, Hand of Protection, Divine Shield, which if glyphed, heals you for every damage over time effect you had on yourself, Divine Protection for spell damage reduction or half spell, half physical damage reduction. Your Flash of Light is instant after stacking your Judgment and heals for quite a bit. You can also opt for double Hands of Protection, Sacrifice and Freedom if you choose to run this talent, and be even more supportive. Not amazing for duels, his burst cooldowns can very easily be kited by other classes, not very helpful in BGs either. A tier. Arms Warrior goes straight in S tier. Probably the best melee on MoP. Amazing damage and mobility, double charge, leap, intervene. You can dodge everything. You can play double reflect or double stun, blaze storm, or put your talent points into more damage with Avatar and Dragon's Roar. Arms definitely belongs among the top and is a top choice for Arena. If you want to play melee, play Warrior. Once geared, you destroy people. It is one of the most annoying classes. You can reflect fears and sheeps on your opponents, and you have probably the most overpowered heal in the game, Second Wind, making you immortal anytime you reach low HP. It's a different playstyle compared to Wrath of Lich King, less complex, you no longer have stands. For 2v2, get a Resto Shaman or any other healer, but Shaman is your number one pick. There is no better choice. You could theoretically play it in double DPS, but it's not nearly as competitive. It would surprise people on low ratings where they might not expect it, but on higher ratings, this burst damage will easily be prevented. In threes, you have many options. With Survival Hunter and Healer, Resto Shaman, Holy Paladin are the best healers for most comps. Mistweaver Monk and Resto Druid are also solid options. Feral Druid, Frost Mage, Ellie or Enhancement Shaman, Affliction Warlock for DPS. Fury Warrior is never seen in PvP, not above 1500 rating. Arms is so much better that playing Fury just doesn't make much sense. F tier. The last played class on the list is Death Knight. It is one of the strongest classes. Unholy has an amazing sustained DPS. It can easily be at the top of the leaderboards. You can death grip, freeze a target in place, and nuke people if they underestimated you. Best played with a Mistweaver Monk in 2v2, this comp can beat a ton of other comps. DK is great in 3v3, it can play with many other classes, but it lacks mobility compared to Warrior. If enemy catches you in a bad spot, they can destroy you. A Monkin team can help you a lot, freedom you or prevent some burst on you, but it's not quite the S tier level. For instance, Red Paladin would be more helpful in PvP than a DK. Besides Mistweaver Monk, it can also play with any other healer, but Monk can be more aggressive, can go much more offensive than the other healer specs. Add a Hunter, Affliction Warlock, Arms Warrior, maybe even Balance Druid or Shadow Priest in 3v3, and you should be good to go. It goes to the top of A tier. DK's Frost spec can do insane numbers, has insane on-demand burst damage, but lacks defensives. It can easily be kited, and you will be often targeted by your opponents in arena. You have less abilities and options how you can play Frost. Unholy can withstand a lot more. In 3v3, you would prefer to have an Unholy DK on your team. Frost DK is more for fun spec. You rely on enemies' mistakes more than anything. Frost DK goes in C tier. Subtlety Rogue is S tier. Top 2v2 DPS. Unreal crowd control. You can peel for your partners and make their life much easier. You can even reset the fights if you want to. You only want to play in a double DPS as Subtlety. You never want to be wasting your time playing with a healer. Still a king of 1v1. Get a Balanced Druid or Marksmanship Hunter for 2v2 ideally, or Shadow Priest, which is also a playable comp. These compositions can go all the way to the top. In 3v3, get Hunter, Shadow Priest, Frost or Fire Mage, Destruction Warlock, and combine it with a Holy Paladin or Resto Shaman, which are the two top 3v3 healers, and you're golden. Rogue is great to have in a rated BG group too. Assassination spec is playable, it has damage, but is incomparable to Subtlety. Goes in C tier, it's never seen on top ratings. Combat Rogue also has damage and can kill people. It has 7-second kidney shot stun duration, which can be very dangerous, but people will still prefer to have a Subtlety spec over any other Rogue spec in any PvP bracket. Also C tier. Enhancement Shaman has a lot of DPS, can be played with a healer since it can solo kill people, not better than Unholy DK or Red Paladin as far as arena options. The classes in A tier can do something special. Enhancement Shaman can only really burst and off heal and isn't very impressive otherwise. You don't want an Enhancement Shaman in your rated BG group either. It can be great in random battlegrounds though and can do some really good damage. Best for 2v2 with you is Holy Paladin. You can pretty much kill anything in this comp. Enhancement can also support the healer a lot. Red plus Enhance is good too, but will oftentimes lose against other double DPS comps. Both Red and Enhance are easily kited, and their burst is also easily countered by the enemy with snares and defensives. You can play with Hunter or Warrior, maybe Red Paladin or Unholy DK in 3v3, playable with any healer besides Resto Shaman logically. B tier. Elemental Shaman is a strong spec with great sustained DPS. Works very well with the Holy Paladin 2v2, that is the best healer option for him. It's not as good with DPSs, has very few comp options for 2v2. He could maybe play with a Shadow Priest too, but it's far from best. It also has AoV healing, much like Enhancement, but not much besides. It is no longer the king of AoE DPS in Battlegrounds. It has way more competition now in Mists of Pandaria compared to Cataclysm. It could be paired up with a Warrior, Rogue, Frost Mage or Shadow Priest in 3v3, and Holy Paladin or Resto Druid Healer, also B tier. Monk has unreal mobility and great DPS. It is among top DPSs in 2v2, has a big toolkit and decent crowd control. A tier, and it's even in front of Death Knights and Paladins. Certainly better than Shaman. Mobility, even better than that of a Druid, can keep up even with Hunters and Mages and chase them down. Windwalker Monk can kill anything in 1v1, literally anything. It might have a harder time with a Mage for instance, but if the Monk can stack up fast and pop his cooldowns, he will do crazy hits. Plus, he has Karma. You can paralyze your targets instantly, root and stun them repeatedly. Definitely one of the best dueling classes on Mists of Pandaria. You have a wide variety of viable arena compositions, good with a Holy Paladin 2v2, can also be played with a Holy Priest. It usually tops ratings with a healer, but if you want to play double DPS, you can play with a Red Paladin, but it's not as competitive. There are only very few double DPS comps on Mists of Pandaria that are real competitive. The rest are more for fun. For 3v3, play with Warrior, Hunter, Destruction Warlock or Frost Mage. Feral Druid goes in B tier. Doesn't have instant cyclones anymore, so it can easily be interrupted or line of sighted if he decides to hardcast them. It is a fun spec to play. It has a good sustained damage through bleeds. It is mostly played with Priest in 2v2, since through Symbiosis, Priest gets the Cyclone ability and is able to focus on crowd controlling enemies, while the Feral Druid can focus on doing as much damage as possible. And in 3v3, you can play with a Warrior, Frost Mage, Hunter, and maybe Affliction Warlock for rotting targets with bleeds and damage over time. It is playable, but also requires a lot of skill in the class. It is one of the more difficult classes to play. Feral is also great in 1v1, although missing the instant cyclones is very noticeable if you were used to the Cataclysm Feral. But you still have the instant roots. You don't want to have a Feral Druid in rated BGs, you would still prefer to have a Guardian Druid instead. Balanced Druid is S tier. The end. The best for Battlegrounds with insane damage, played with a Subtlety Rogue in 2v2 and nothing else. It is the best, strongest double DPS comp in 2v2 on Mists of Pandaria that can beat literally anything. So many options to crowd control, switch targets, reset fights. They dictate what's gonna happen in the arena. In 3v3 with Subtlety Rogue, or maybe an Affliction Warlock or Shadow Priest combined with a Holy Paladin. A good balanced Druid would be one of the best 2 spellcasters in the game, along with Frost Mage. Balance is not played with healers in 2v2, and also does great in 1v1. Beast Mastery Hunter is B tier. Good spec, but it has problems with plate wearing classes. It's a long game, he doesn't have enough DPS to take him down. He is good against cloth DPS since pet's damage doesn't scale with armor. You can beat the best comp in the game with a healer by your side. Frost Mage and Holy Priest, since it's harder to crowd control the pet too, so the pet is still able to do damage to the target even if you are not in line of sight yourself as a hunter. If you meet a warrior or death knight, you just lose. You still have all your crowd control like scatter shot, trap, as any other hunter spec. Beast Mastery would overall have the lowest DPS of all the hunter specs. It is more played with a healer in 2v2. On the other hand, Marksmanship Hunter plays with a DPS in 2v2. Best 2v2 comps with Marksmanship would be with Subtlety Rogue or Retribution Paladin at higher ratings. It is definitely better than Beast Mastery thanks to its unbelievable burst damage. It can also make targets vanish in Battlegrounds if he pops burst. Marksmanship focuses on playing in burst comps in 2v2 and 3v3. A tier, Survival Hunter goes in A before Red Paladin. It is primarily played with a healer and it can go very high in 2v2. Marksmanship Hunter is mostly about burst damage and cooldowns, while Survival is more about constant damage. Survival is the best hunter spec for PvP. The best healer options for 2v2 would be Holy Paladin, Resto Druid or Holy Priest. Survival is better paired with more sustained DPSers in 3v3, such as an Unholy DK. Hunter has plenty of options to play with in arenas. It is playable with almost any spec from S or A tier. Frost Mage is an easy top of the S tier. Frost has an insane damage. Just within Deep Freeze, he can kill you if you ignore it. Top for 2v2, some of the best crowd control and snares in the entire game. Great for escaping crucial situations. It is unreal in the hands of a skilled player. It can be played with a healer in 2v2, especially Holy Priest, not so much with DPS classes. In 3v3 you can play many comps to the top, with Arms Warrior, Shadow Priest, Rogue, and maybe even Feral and Healer. Fire can be played with a healer, but paired up with a Shadow Priest in 2v2 is super deadly. If Fire Mage can set up his burst properly, It can even solo healers, except Holy Paladins. One more comp that is playable up to some 2000 rating is with a balanced Druid, but it doesn't compare to Shadow Priest in 2v2. Rogue, Shadow Priest or Balanced Druid are decent 3v3 arena partners for you as a Fire Mage. Top of the B tier. Arcane Mage is super squishy. It can do a lot of damage, but you never see it in arena. You know what you can expect from it, and its burst is easily countered. Belongs to the end of B tier. Warlock now brings Demonic Gateway to teleport your party members and improve your party's mobility in crucial times. Affliction Warlock is insane for 3v3. It can kill 3 targets at the same time if it has enough space to multi-dot. And many arena comps to choose from. Crowd control and survivability are also great. In 2v2 it requires more skill, and you would need a Resto Druid ideally with you as an Affliction Warlock, maybe a Holy Paladin. It is a 3v3 dominant class and also very good in Battlegrounds. Not so impressive in 2v2, where it struggles against Unholy DKs and Mistweaver monks. Warlock overall is a very skill dependent class, so you can meet one that plays it as if it was F tier, and then you can meet one that is unbeatable. Overall, it would probably still deserve to be at the end of S tier, despite its lacking performance in 2v2. Destruction Warlock is the end of A tier. Also a great spec for Battlegrounds, oftentimes seen in all brackets including 1v1, 2v2 and 3v3, packing some of the best burst DPS with Chaos Bolts, limited mobility but also extra survivability cooldowns, defensives and even pretty good healing on this expansion. There aren't too many Demonology Warlocks to be seen in Arena since Destruction and Affliction specs are extremely popular. You can play it with a Balanced Druid in 2v2, but you will have a hard time finding arena partners as most classes that work with you will rather choose a different spec to play with. Demo certainly has enough damage and crowd control in Mists of Pandaria, but it would only make it towards the end of B tier. Shadow Priest has a crazy amount of support, which in hands of a skilled player can be really strong. In 2v2 with a Fire Mage or a Subtlety Rogue, or a healer, preferably Monk or Resto Shaman, maybe a Resto Druid, you do enough damage to take on a target and kill it alone, so you don't need to play with another DPS. Shadow shines in 3v3 arenas and does massive damage in Battlegrounds. You can even play 1v1 as Shadow and do pretty well. Middle of A tier. This is the meta in Mists of Pandaria PvP. It is obviously hard to compare classes through different brackets and compositions. While one class may be S tier in 3v3, it can be a low B tier in 2v2 and vice versa. This is mainly from the point of view of a Holy Paladin main player, so if you play a different class, your experience may slightly differ. Thanks to Wickedfury for helping out with this tier list. Hope this video helped you and you can be looking forward to a lot of Mists of Pandaria PvP action on this channel in the upcoming weeks, since the first PvP season on Twin Stars Helios is starting soon. And who knows, maybe I'll push some serious rating even on Stormforge's Mistblade. Thanks for watching, see you in Arena.